Welcome to the Turn of the Screw in a Nutshell. On Christmas Eve, an unnamed narrator, along with some other unnamed characters, listens to Douglas, a friend, read a manuscript written by a former governess which Douglas claims to have known and now is dead. The manuscript tells the story of how the young governess is hired by a man who became responsible for his young nephew and niece after the deaths of their parents. He lives mainly in London, but also has a country house, Bly. The boy, Miles, is attending a boarding school, whilst his younger sister, Flora, is living in a country house in Essex, where she's cared for by Mrs. Groves, the housekeeper. Flora's uncle, the governess's new employer, is uninterested in raising the children and gives her full charge, explicitly stating that she's not to bother him with communications of any sort. The governess travels to Bly and begins her duties. Miles returns from school for the summer just after a letter arrives from the headmaster stating that he's been expelled. Miles never speaks of the matter, and the governess is hesitant to raise the issue. She fears there is some horrible secret behind the expulsion, but is too charmed by the boy to want to press the issue. Soon after, around the grounds of the estate, the governess begins to see the figures of a man and woman whom she does not recognise. The figures come and go at will, without being seen or challenged by other members of the household, and they seem to the governess to be supernatural. She learns from Mrs. Groves that the governor's predecessor, Miss Jessel, and another employee, Peter Quint, had had a close relationship. Before their deaths, Jessel and Quint spent much of the time with Flora and Miles, and the governess becomes convinced that the two children are aware of the ghost's presence. Without permission, Flora leaves the house while Miles is playing music for the governess. The governess notices Flora's absence and goes with Mrs. Groves in search of her. They find her on the shore of a nearby lake, and the governess is convinced that Flora has been talking to the ghost of Miss Jessel. When the governess finally confronts Flora, the girl denies seeing Miss Jessel and asks not to see the new governess again. Mrs. Groves takes Flora away to her uncle, leaving the governess with Miles, who that night at last talks to her about his expulsion. The ghost of Quint appears to the governess at the window. The governess shields Miles, who attempts to see the ghost. The governess tells Miles he is no longer controlled by the ghost, and then finds that he has died in her arms. This is an 1898 horror novella by Henry James that first appeared in serial format in Collier's Weekly magazine. The novel explores ideas about evil and focuses on tension and suspense. It is deliberately ambiguous as to what the source of evil is. Throughout his career, James was attracted to the ghost story. He was not fond of literature's stereotypical ghosts. He preferred to create ghosts that were eerie extensions of everyday reality. In the novel, the governess refers directly to the mysteries of Udolpho and indirectly to Jane Eyre, evoking a comparison of the governess not only to the character of Jane, but also to the character of Bertha, the madwoman in the attic. It can also be linked to Wuthering Heights due to the focus on ghosts and the supernatural. Read Chapter 15. How does James create a Gothic mood? What was the public reaction to the text when it was published? Research Freud's theory of the uncanny. I hope you have a very gory Gothic Christmas.